In the quiet rhythm of an ancient morning long before disaster ever learned, the cities named the streets were already awake in their own gentle way, not with urgency or fear, but with the familiar softness of routine that had repeated itself for generations. Stone doors opening with a low scrape, sandals brushing dust from thresholds, distant voices murmuring greetings that needed no volume, because they had been spoken 1,000 times before. And above it all the mountain stood, calm and unremarkable, its dark slope blending into the sky like it always had, so ordinary that no one truly looked at it anymore. Because when danger becomes familiar, it stops feeling like danger at all. And in this city, nestled comfortably at the foot of a volcano, life had learned how to ignore the silent presence, watching from above, how to live beneath it as if it were nothing more than another hill, another part of the landscape that would never change. And so the baker kneaded dough with slow practiced hands while the ovens warmed. The potter shaped clay with careful fingers while humming a tune passed down from his father there. Children traced patterns in the dirt with sticks, laughing softly so as not to wake the elders still, resting inside cool stone rooms, and time flowed gently, unbroken, unaware that it was already beginning to slow, already preparing to sleep, because this city was living its last ordinary day without knowing it, and that ignorance was perhaps its greatest mercy, as the air itself seemed calm and forgiving, carrying the scent of bread, oil, and earth, while somewhere beneath the ground the mountain shifted almost imperceptibly, not in anger, not yet, but in quiet preparation, like a deep breath taken before a long silence. And still no one noticed, because centuries of peace had taught them that nothing ever truly happened here, nothing that mattered enough to disrupt a morning like this. And so the city continued to exist inside its illusion of permanence, with walls that had stood longer than living memory, with temples whose stones had absorbed the whispers of countless prayers, with homes layered upon older homes, each generation building upon the last, never imagining that one day everything would stop at once, that voices would freeze mid-sentence, that footsteps would never complete their pots, that meals would remain half prepared forever. But for now, in this long, slow moment, everything felt safe. And safety has a way of making people gentle and hurried and trusting. And that trust wrapped the city like a blanket, lulling it into comfort as the sun rose higher and warmed the stones, drawing people into the streets, toward the fountains where water flowed endlessly, toward the markets where goods exchanged hands, in familiar patterns where the sounds of commerce were soft rather than sharp, more like murmurs than calls, because there was no rush. There was always tomorrow, always another day, and the idea that tomorrow might never come was too distant, too abstract to deserve attention. And even when the ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, so slight that it could be mistaken for imagination, people simply paused, smiled uneasily, and continued on, because the earth had always moved here, had always reminded them gently of its presence, and it had never followed through with anything worse, and so memory softened caution, routine dulled instinct, and the city kept breathing, slow and steady, like a creature half asleep, unaware that it was about to fall into a sleep so deep that centuries would pass above it without a single dream, because when the first ash finally fell, it did so quietly, almost kindly, like gray snow drifting from a sky that still looked normal, still blue in places, and at first people laughed, brushing it from their hair and shoulders, joking about the mountain's mood, unaware that this softness was only the beginning, that the air itself was beginning to change, growing heavier, thicker, harder to breathe, that the sky was slowly dimming, not with night, but with something far older and more final. And even then, even as darkness crept in before its time, fear did not arrive all at once. It seeped in gradually like cold through stone, making people move closer together, speak more quietly, close their doors, light the lamps earlier than usual, and retreat indoors with the uneasy feeling that something was wrong, but not yet knowing what that something truly was. And as the hours passed, ash layered itself gently upon rooftops, streets, and statues, softening edges, muting colors, turning the entire city into a blurred memory of itself. And still the mountain did not roar. It did not explode with sudden violence. It simply continued, steadily, patiently, releasing more and more of itself into the air, as if it were slowly exhaling centuries of stored breath. And inside the city, people waited, listening to the unfamiliar silence that followed when birds stopped singing and dogs stopped barking, when even the wind seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to move through air filled with falling stone. And that silence pressed against their ears, against their thoughts, making every small sound feel too loud, too sharp. And as night fully arrived, though the sun had not truly set, the city glowed faintly with lamplight, each small flame a fragile attempt to hold back the darkness, and within homes families gathered close, speaking in hushed tones, telling stories not to explain what was happening, but to distract from it, to preserve normalcy just a little longer. Because as long as stories continued, life felt intact, and as long as life felt intact, fear could be postponed. And so they talked of ordinary things, of plans that now would never be fulfilled, of tomorrow's work, of future celebrations, not knowing that these words would be the last echoes of their voices, suspended forever in the stillness that was coming. And when the air finally grew too thick, too heavy, too impossible to ignore, people wrapped cloths around their faces, held hands, whispered prayers, and waited, not in panic, but in a kind of exhausted acceptance, because the human mind has limits, and when those limits are reached, it chooses stillness over chaos, sleep over struggle, And in that choice, the city began to surrender slowly, quietly, as ash poured into rooms, filled lungs, covered eyes, and erased boundaries between inside and outside, between home and street, between life and death, until everything was the same color, the same texture, the same silence. And then, just as gently as it had begun, it ended, not with a single final moment, but with a gradual fading. As movement stopped, as warmth cooled, as the last breath was taken without drama, without witnesses, and the city fell asleep beneath its blanket of ash, sealed away from the world above, protected from decay by the very force that destroyed it, locked in a perfect pause. While above it time continued, empires rose and fell, languages changed, borders shifted. Generations lived entire lives unaware that beneath their feet a city remained exactly as it had been on its final day, waiting patiently without longing or regret, because the dead do not measure time, and so centuries pass like a single night until one day the ash was disturbed, the silence broken, and sunlight reached places it had not touched in hundreds of years, revealing streets frozen mid-step, homes mid-thought, objects still holding the shape of hands that had once used them. And the world above stood in quiet awe, realizing that this was not just a ruin, not just a tragedy, but a message from the past, a reminder that even entire cities can fall, asleep in an instant, that permanence is an illusion, and that there is a strange, haunting peace in the way this city did not fight its fate, but drifted into it, softly like a dream. And now, as you lie listening, breathing slowly, letting the weight of the day fall away, imagine that city still resting beneath layers of time, undisturbed, calm, untouched by worry or urgency, and allow yourself to share in that stillness, to sink gently into your own rest, knowing that sleep, like history, is simply another form of quiet preservation.